before I tell you how my own son looked me in the eye and said, "We're sick of you, Mom," I want to pause and speak directly to you. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like your voice no longer mattered, or like the years you spent caring, cooking, and holding everyone together somehow made you smaller instead of stronger, please hear me now. You are not done yet. Your kindness is not weakness. Your story is not over. And these years of your life, they are not about fading into the background. They're about standing tall, smiling wider, and remembering that dignity and peace still belong to you. And because I know how heavy some days can feel, I want to share something truly special before we go any further. It's a book that's close to my heart. 38 uplifting and funny short stories for seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. It's psychotherapist approved and filled with warm, light-hearted stories that will lift your spirits, bring back good memories, and give your mind the joyful exercise it deserves. If you've ever needed a reminder that life still holds laughter, love, and second chances, this book is for you. You can grab your copy from the pinned comment below. And before we dive into what happened when I finally stopped staying quiet and chose to stand up for myself, and for every woman who's ever been told she's too much or in the way, please don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend who needs a bit of courage, and subscribe so you never miss these real-life stories of women finding strength when life tests them. Because what comes next in my story will show you exactly this. Sometimes the most painful words from family are what finally push us to reclaim our peace and remember who we really are. My name is Margaret Collins, and I never thought I'd live to hear my own son say he was sick of me. It happened on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind where the house smells like coffee and toast, and the air still feels half asleep. I was standing in the kitchen, holding the coffee pot, when Randy suddenly said, in that sharp tone he uses when he's worked up about something, "We're sick of you, Mom. You're always here, always in our business. Maybe it's time you found your own place." At first, I thought I misheard him. He couldn't have said, "We're sick of you, not my son." I just stood there, holding the pot over my cup, waiting for him to say it was a joke. But he didn't. He just crossed his arms, leaning on the counter like he was making some big announcement. His wife, Genevieve, didn't even look up from her phone. She muttered, without a trace of emotion, "It's exhausting, honestly." That word, exhausting, cut deeper than I expected. It was how she used to describe her job, not me. I looked at both of them, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. My voice came out softer than I meant it to. "This is my house." I said it not to argue, but to remind them. Maybe they'd forgotten. Randy laughed under his breath, like he couldn't believe I'd said that. "Mom, come on. We've lived here for 3 years. We've made it our home. We pay for the internet, the water, groceries. We do our part." Genevieve finally looked up, eyes rolled halfway to the ceiling. "Exactly. We've turned this place into something livable. No offense, but it looked like a time capsule before we moved in." I didn't say anything. My hands were trembling slightly, so I set the coffee pot down. Before I dropped it, the smell of burnt toast filled the air. The toaster had popped minutes ago, but nobody cared. Randy pushed on. "We're grateful, Mom, really, but this just isn't working anymore. You're always here." I wanted to say, "Of course I'm here, it's my home," but instead, I just nodded like I was listening to a neighbor complain about the weather. Genevieve started tidying up the kitchen, sliding my mug aside so she could wipe the counter. That's when I realized it wasn't just a passing comment. They'd talked about this, planned it. She was already acting like she owned the place. "You need your own space," she said flatly. "We do too. You deserve to live somewhere peaceful. Maybe a senior community or something." I felt my chest tighten. A senior community. Like I was already halfway gone. I looked at Randy, hoping he'd step in. Maybe tell her That was too much. But he didn't. He was quiet, staring at the floor like a man trying to avoid looking guilty. My voice was calm, but I could hear the hurt under it. You both seem to forget this is still my home. I let you move in when you said you were saving for a down payment. You said it would be temporary. Randy sighed. That was before inflation, Mom. We're still saving. But you've got to admit, it's getting tense around here. I wanted to tell him about all the nights I stayed up late, when he was a baby, when his fever wouldn't break, about how I paid for his college books, even when my hands ached from overtime. But those stories meant nothing now. They belonged to another lifetime. Genevieve leaned against the counter, arms folded. It's not personal. It's just time to move forward. I looked at her, the woman my son chose, the woman who now decided when I'd outstayed my welcome. She smiled politely, like she was doing me a favor by saying it. I thought of my late husband, Bill, and how proud he was when we bought this house 22 years ago. He'd said, "We'll grow old here, Maggie. This place will always be ours." I still hear his voice when the wind hits the porch at night. Now here I was being told by my own child to find somewhere else to grow old. Randy took my silence as agreement. He clapped his hands once, awkwardly. Good. We'll help you look. Maybe something closer to town, where you can walk to the store. I didn't answer. I just picked up my mug and poured myself that long-delayed cup of coffee. The kitchen felt cold, though the sun was shining straight through the window. Genevieve turned back to her phone, scrolling like the conversation was over. Randy glanced at me one last time, his voice softening. "Don't take it the wrong way, Mom. We just want our own life. Our own life." Funny how quickly family turns into them, and me. I watched them both walk out of the kitchen, whispering to each other as they went down the hallway. The house was quiet again. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I looked around that kitchen, the cabinets built by hand, the old oak table that's seen every Thanksgiving, every late night talk. Everything in it told our story. My story. And now, somehow, I'd become the guest. I sat down at the table and stared out the window into the backyard. The magnolia tree was blooming just like it had every spring since we planted it. Randy was 10 when he dug the first hole for it, laughing when dirt flew in his hair. I wondered if he remembered that. Probably not. People remember what serves them best. I sipped my coffee and felt the ache in my throat settle into something steady. Not anger, not sadness. Just a quiet understanding that something had shifted for good. They'd made their feelings clear. And I wasn't going to beg to stay somewhere I wasn't wanted. Still, the words replayed in my head like a broken record. "We're sick of you, Mom." After 40 years of raising, loving, feeding, forgiving, and supporting, my reward was those 6 words. But I didn't cry. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and set it in the sink. My reflection in the window looked older, yes, but not broken. I whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. They forgot who signed the papers and who made the down payment. Then I straightened my back, wiped the counter clean, and decided one thing right then and there. If they were tired of seeing me every day, I'd make sure they got their wish, just not in the way they expected. After that morning in the kitchen, I couldn't shake Randy's words out of my head. But to understand how deep they cut, you'd have to know how we even got here. When my husband, Bill, passed away 9 years ago, I thought the silence in this house would swallow me whole. He'd built half the furniture himself, and his laugh still lived in the walls. I didn't plan on anyone moving in. I just wanted to get through the days without crying over his empty chair. Then Randy called one night. He sounded tired, worn out from chasing bills and working long hours. Genevieve had just lost her job at the dental office, and they were worried about rent. He said, "Mom, could we stay with you for a while? Just until we save up for a house." It sounded reasonable at the time. I said yes before he even finished the question. That's what mothers do. We help. I figured it would be a few months, maybe a year at most. When they moved in, it felt nice at first. The sound of footsteps again, laughter in the hallway, and the smell of family dinners filling the house. I had the grandkids around, Liam, who was 6 then, and Clara, only 3. I set up a little play corner in the den with books and puzzles. I thought maybe in a strange way I'd get a second chance at the family life I missed since Bill died. But time has a way of changing people. Months turned into years, and what started as gratitude slowly turned into entitlement. At first, I didn't notice. I was busy keeping everyone fed and comfortable. I still paid the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, and even the electricity some months when Randy's paycheck came up short. I never made a fuss. I told myself it was what parents did. I cooked dinner most nights, even though Genevieve said she preferred takeout. I kept the laundry going, made sure the kids had clean uniforms for school, packed lunches, and helped with homework in the evenings. Every morning, I'd be up first, fixing breakfast before anyone's alarm went off. Liam loved pancakes, and Clara liked her eggs scrambled just right. I'd pour Genevieve her coffee with cream. No sugar, just how she liked it. She rarely said thank you, but I told myself she was busy. After they left for work and school, I'd clean the kitchen, run errands, and pay bills. At night, after everyone went to bed, I'd sit at the kitchen table and quilt. Quiet hours were my peace. Sometimes I'd talk to Bill, whispering like he could still hear me. "They just need a little help. Honey," I'd say, "once they're on their feet, they'll move out." But they never did. The tone in the house started shifting after about 2 years. Genevieve began redecorating, not small changes either. She moved my furniture around, took down the floral curtains Bill had picked, and replaced them with gray ones because, as she said, neutral colors are modern. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and found she'd replaced my framed wedding photo with a print of some abstract painting she bought online. She smiled when she saw my face. "Oh, I just thought this would brighten up the space," she said. That word again, the space. Like I wasn't part of it anymore. I bit my tongue. It wasn't worth the argument. Then came the pantry incident. I went to grab a jar of jam one morning and found the door locked. I thought maybe the latch had jammed. But later, when Genevieve came in, she pulled a key from her pocket and opened it like nothing was strange. I asked, "Why did you lock the pantry?" She looked surprised that I'd even question it. "Oh, Randy and I just wanted to keep the groceries organized. The kids were getting into snacks too much." But she never gave me a key. That was the first time I truly felt like a guest in my own home. From there, the small things started piling up. She stopped asking if I wanted to join family outings. She rearranged my china cabinet, donated things without asking, even changed the Wi-Fi password, and forgot to tell me. The grandkids were still sweet, though. Liam would sneak into my room, sometimes to show me his science projects, and Clara liked to braid my hair while I watched my shows. They were my bright spots. But even they started picking up on the tension. One day, Clara asked, "Grandma, why does Mommy roll her eyes when you talk?" I didn't know what to say. I told her grown-ups just get tired sometimes. But deep down, I knew what it was. Genevieve wanted the house to feel like hers, and my presence reminded her it never would be. It's funny how control doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes in small, quiet ways, changing the locks, changing the rules, and pretending it's all for your good. I started keeping my things in my bedroom, my sewing machine, photo albums, even my own coffee mug. I told myself it was to stay organized, but the truth was it felt safer that way. Every now and then, Randy would notice. "Mom, you don't have to hide in your room," he'd say, like I was sulking. I'd smile and tell him I liked my peace and quiet, but peace wasn't what I had. Then came the remark that changed how I saw everything. I was folding laundry in the hallway one afternoon when I heard Genevieve talking on the phone in the living room. Her voice was casual, like she was discussing weekend plans. "Yeah, she's still here," she said, laughing lightly. "I know, but she's too old to live alone. We'll figure something out." I froze mid-fold. The shirt in my hand slipped to the floor. Too old to live alone. I stood there, half hidden behind the wall, trying to steady my breathing. That was the moment something inside me clicked. It wasn't about space or tension or groceries anymore. It was about control. They didn't want me gone because I was in the way. They wanted me gone because they were already planning to claim what wasn't theirs. I picked up the laundry, folded it neatly, and took it to my room. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the family picture on my nightstand. Randy, Genevieve, the kids, and me at the beach 2 summers ago. We all looked happy then. Maybe we were. I thought about how much I'd given. Money, time, love, energy, and how little they'd given back. Respect, gratitude, decency. That night, while they were out at dinner, I went to my file cabinet and pulled out the deed to the house. Bill's signature was right there next to mine. My name on every line that mattered. I ran my fingers over it slowly and said to myself, they may have filled this house with their things, but it still belongs to me. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to power again. They didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. Before you scroll, ask yourself, how many years have you given without thanks? Share this story so another mom knows she's not alone. My 68th birthday came on a Sunday in late March. The azaleas in the yard were starting to bloom, and the air had that soft Florida warmth that usually makes me happy. I woke up that morning hoping, maybe foolishly, that the day would feel special. I didn't expect a big fuss. I'm not that kind of person. I just thought we might share a nice meal, maybe a cake, maybe a card from the grandkids. That's all. When I came into the kitchen, no one said a word. Randy was scrolling through his phone at the table, half awake, and Genevieve was measuring creamer into her coffee. Clara and Liam were arguing about a TV show. I smiled anyway. "Good morning," I said. Genevieve nodded. "Morning." Randy mumbled something that sounded like, "Hey," without looking up. I waited a few seconds, but no one said anything else. Finally, I poured myself coffee and said it softly, hoping to jog their memory. "Well, happy birthday to me, I guess." Genevieve looked up briefly. "Oh, right. That's today. We should do something later." She said it the same way you remember to pick up milk at the store. I laughed lightly to hide the sting. "Don't trouble yourself. I've already baked a cake. Chocolate, Bill's favorite recipe." She raised an eyebrow. "You baked? You should have told me. I could have grabbed something from Publix." Randy didn't even look up. He was tapping away on his phone, smiling at something on the screen. That afternoon, I roasted some chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. I set the table with the good plates, the ones with the blue trim bill, and I bought at a yard sale back in the 90s. I even lit the small candle centerpiece. By 6 o'clock, everyone gathered at the table. The grandkids were hungry and restless. Genevieve carried in a foil pan from the oven and set it down in the middle. "Store was packed," she said. I grabbed rotisserie chicken. "Hope that's okay." I blinked. I had cooked all afternoon. My chicken sat cooling on the counter, untouched. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "That's fine." The meal started quietly. The kids ate quickly, so they could get back to their tablets. Randy scrolled on his phone between bites. Genevieve talked about a co-worker's vacation plans, barely pausing long enough to let me answer. After a while, I cleared my throat. I'd like to make a toast. They looked up briefly, polite enough to humor me. I lifted my glass of sweet tea. To family, I said, through all seasons and all storms. Before I could take a sip, Genevieve laughed softly. Family means space too, Mom. We need ours. The words hung in the air like smoke. Liam looked up, confused. Space. What do you mean, Mom? She waved her hand. Nothing, honey. Just grown-up talk. Randy chuckled and went back to scrolling. I stared at my glass, feeling the warmth drain from my face. I wanted to remind them what family really meant. The nights I stayed with Clara in the hospital when she broke her arm, the mornings I drove Liam to school because Genevieve was running late, the way this house kept them safe when the world outside felt too heavy. But I didn't say any of it. I knew it wouldn't matter. After dinner, Genevieve stood up and said, I'll handle cleanup. Then she turned to Randy. Babe, could you help me with the dishes? She didn't even look at me. I carried my own plate to the sink, then went to get the cake from the counter. I'd baked it the night before. 2 layers, chocolate frosting, a few walnuts sprinkled on top, just like Bill liked it. When I set it down, Clara clapped. Yay, cake. That small bit of excitement from her warmed my heart for a second. I lit 1 candle, just 1, and smiled. All right, who's going to sing? No one moved. I laughed softly. Guess I'll sing to myself then. So I did. I whispered the song under my breath and blew out the candle. Randy said, Happy birthday, Mom, without looking up. Genevieve took a slice and said, Not bad, considering it's homemade. I cut a small piece for myself and sat at the table, pretending not to notice that everyone had already drifted away. Randy back to his phone, the kids to the living room, Genevieve loading the dishwasher. That's when it hit me. The house was full, but I'd never felt so alone. Later that night, I washed the dishes she left in the sink and wiped down the counters. The cake sat half-eaten, the candle bent from the heat. I packed the rest in the fridge. As I turned off the kitchen lights, I heard laughter coming from the living room. Randy and Genevieve were on the couch watching a comedy show, laughing loud and free, the kind of laughter I hadn't heard from them in months. For a moment, I thought maybe I should join them. But then I caught the end of Genevieve's sentence over the TV noise. See, this is what normal feels like. Randy laughed again. Yeah, no stress. They didn't notice me standing in the hallway, watching them from the shadows. The light from the TV flickered across their faces, and I realized what had changed. They weren't trying to build a life with me anymore. They were trying to build one without me. I walked back to my room, quietly closing the door behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the wrapped present I'd bought myself, a small silver bracelet I found at a thrift shop. I'd planned to let the kids give it to me as a surprise, but I didn't bother now. I slipped it on my wrist, the metal cool against my skin. It caught the light from my bedside lamp and sparkled faintly. I whispered, "Happy birthday, Margaret." Then I looked around my room, my one small corner of a house that used to feel like mine, and I knew something had broken for good. It wasn't just my heart. It was the illusion that kindness always earns kindness back. That night, I couldn't sleep. The laughter from the living room went on for hours. I could hear Genevieve's voice, light and easy, and Randy's deep chuckle in reply. They sounded happy, relaxed, and it hit me. They'd already replaced me with convenience. I'd been their babysitter, their cook, their safety net, and they were already picturing a life where I was gone. I stared at the ceiling until the house went quiet. Then I turned off the lamp and whispered to the dark, "If this is family, maybe it's time to find peace somewhere else." I didn't know then what that would mean or how far it would go, But in that moment, I decided one thing. I wasn't going to spend another birthday waiting for people to notice I existed. Not anymore. The morning after my birthday, I woke up feeling hollow. The house was quiet except for the sound of the refrigerator humming. I made coffee and sat by the window, staring at the magnolia tree outside. The blossoms were falling, soft and white, drifting like snow. It struck me how something can look peaceful even when it's falling apart. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk. I needed air, just air and a face that wasn't pretending everything was fine. My neighbor, Paula, was outside watering her potted plants when she saw me. "Morning, Margaret," she called. "You look tired. Hon, everything all right?" I tried to smile. "I'm fine, just needed a little break from the house." She tilted her head and set her watering can down. "Come on in for tea. You look like you could use a good talk." Inside her kitchen, everything smelled like lemon and cinnamon. Paula was one of those friends who never pried but always seemed to know when something was wrong. We sat at her table with mugs of chamomile tea, and she waited for me to speak first. I didn't even mean to say it, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. "Randy and Genevieve told me they're sick of me." Paula blinked. "They said that, just like that." I nodded. "In my kitchen, over breakfast." She shook her head slowly. "You've done everything for them, Margaret. You've housed them, fed them, helped raise those kids. And they have the nerve to talk to you like that." I shrugged, staring down at my tea. Maybe I did too much. Maybe I made it too easy. Paula reached across the table and touched my hand. "Kindness isn't weakness, but sometimes people mistake it for that." That line settled in my chest like a stone. Kindness is being mistaken for weakness. It echoed the whole walk back home. When I got inside, the house felt different. It wasn't just quiet, it felt like someone else's place. There were toys on the floor, Genevieve's magazines on the coffee table, Randy's sneakers by the door. Not one of those things belonged to me, yet they filled every corner. My house had turned into a storage unit for other people's lives. I went into my bedroom and opened the drawer of my old wooden desk. Inside was a folder I hadn't touched in years. I slid it out carefully. It was full of papers, mortgage statements, insurance forms, tax receipts. At the very bottom was the original deed. My name, Margaret Collins. And beside it, my husband's, William Collins. Seeing his signature again brought back memories I'd buried under years of chores and noise. Bill used to run his thumb over the same line and say, "You and I built this from scratch, Maggie. No bank owns it. No one else touches it." I traced that ink with my finger. He'd been gone 9 years, but in that moment, I could almost hear him again. I whispered, "You'd know what to do, wouldn't you?" For a long time, I sat there staring at the deed. My heart didn't feel broken anymore. It felt focused. Every word Randy and Genevieve had said came back like a checklist. "We're sick of you. We need space. Find your own place." Fine. I could give them all the space they wanted. I opened another folder with my property tax receipts. Every one of them was in my name. Every payment came from my checkbook. They hadn't paid a dime of it. I took a deep breath and whispered to the empty room, "If they're sick of me, maybe I should make them sicker." With surprise. That sentence made me smile for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I found the number for Mr. Torres, the real estate agent who'd helped Bill and me buy this house 22 years ago. His card was still tucked in an old phone book. I dialed the number, half expecting it to be disconnected. But after 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Torres Realty," he said. "This is Carlos." "Mr. Torres," I said, "it's Margaret Collins. You helped my husband and me buy the house on Laurel Ridge Drive years ago." There was a pause, then warmth in his voice. "Mrs. Collins. Of course I remember. I'm sorry to hear about Bill. What can I do for you? I hesitated, then said it plain. I want to sell the house. He sounded surprised. Sell? You've lived there forever. I know, but it's time. And I need it to happen quietly. He didn't question me. Just said, understood. Is it paid off? Completely. Then you'll have no problem. Houses in that area go fast. When can I stop by to take a look? Tomorrow morning, I said. After hanging up, I sat there a long while. The decision didn't feel rushed. It felt overdue. That night, I went room to room and started making mental notes. What would stay? What would go? I noticed how much of what filled that house wasn't mine anymore. The living room looked like something out of a catalog Genevieve liked. My quilt was packed away in a closet because it didn't match the decor. My dishes were replaced with the set she bought last Christmas. Even my rocking chair had been shoved into the garage. I realized I could walk out that door, and they wouldn't even notice half the things missing. They'd just move their chaos somewhere else. Before bed, I took out a small box from under my dresser. Inside were keepsakes: Bill's watch, a photo of Randy as a baby, my mother's rosary, and a folded note Bill had written on our 30th anniversary that said, "You're my home, Maggie." I held it close and whispered, "I'm still your home, Bill. Just not theirs anymore." The next morning, the doorbell rang at exactly 9. Mr. Torres stood on the porch, gray hair now, same kind eyes. He looked around the yard and nodded approvingly. "You've kept it beautiful." "Mostly the trees doing," I said, smiling faintly. Inside, I gave him a quiet tour. He took pictures, measured a few rooms, and jotted notes. "The market's strong," he said. "You could list above 250, but if you want a fast close, I'd say 220. It'll draw cash buyers." "I don't care about squeezing every penny," I said. "I want clean, fast, and final." He nodded slowly. "I can make that happen." I followed him to the door, and before he left, I asked, "One last thing. How fast can a sale close if I already own it outright?" He thought for a moment. "If it's a cash offer, and you've got your paperwork ready, maybe 2 weeks." I smiled. "Let's make it 1. He raised an eyebrow, then grinned. "You always were a woman who knew what she wanted." When he drove away, I stood in the doorway, holding that folder against my chest. The sun was warm on my face, but what I felt wasn't comfort. It was certainty. I looked at the magnolia tree one last time and whispered, "You said you wanted space. Randy, let's see how you like it." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I felt steady. I felt like someone who still had power left. Every woman deserves one moment when she stops begging for respect and simply takes it. Tap subscribe if you believe in that moment. And tell me in the comments, when was the last time you chose peace over approval? The next morning, Mr. Torres stopped by again to go over the final listing details. He laid a stack of forms on my kitchen table, the same table where Randy once did his math homework, and where Genevieve now scrolled through her phone during dinner. He adjusted his glasses and said, "If you want this to move quickly, Margaret, we'll need to list it below market. Maybe 215. You'll get immediate offers that way." I nodded slowly. "That's fine. I'm not looking for a bidding war. I just want it done." He flipped through the papers, pen in hand. "And you'll need to start packing up personal items. Anything sentimental or valuable you don't want the buyers to have." I thought about that for a moment. Then I heard myself say something that surprised even me. "List it as is. Everything inside goes with it." Mr. Torres looked up, confused. "You mean furniture, appliances, all of it?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Everything. The bedrooms, the living room, the kitchen, everything stays. Consider it fully furnished." He hesitated. "Even the bedrooms?" I met his eyes. "Yes. It's one less thing for me to pack." They filled this house with their things, not mine. Let them move on without them. He studied me for a second, then said, I'll mark it as turnkey and fully furnished. It'll sell fast, maybe faster than you expect. When he left, I sat there staring at the paperwork. It felt bold, maybe even reckless, but it also felt fair in a way words couldn't explain. They'd turned my generosity into convenience, my home into their playground. If they were sick of me, fine. They could start fresh, without all the things they thought they owned. That evening, I started walking through each room, one by one. The living room was first. Genevieve's decorative pillows lined the couch, all in those dull gray tones she loved. The big flat-screen TV Randy bought on a credit card took up half the wall. His gaming chair sat in the corner like a throne, surrounded by cables and snack wrappers. I touched the back of the chair lightly and whispered, You took the home, Randy, but I'll leave it with someone who deserves it. In the kitchen, I ran my hand over the counter where I used to knead bread. Now it was cluttered with Genevieve's gadgets, air fryer, smoothie blender, spice rack she never used. They'd taken over every inch. In their bedroom, I paused at the door. The bedspread was new, their photos framed on the nightstand, their perfume and cologne on the dresser. I didn't step inside. I just looked around and thought, you both made this house feel smaller. Maybe it's time to make it disappear. Then I went to my own room. It was the only space that still looked like me. My quilt, my rocking chair, Bill's old lamp. I sat down at my desk and opened my drawer. From the back, I pulled out a small wooden box, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the few things that still meant something. Bill's watch, his wedding ring, our mortgage deed, and a small bundle of Randy's childhood photos. Him in his Little League uniform. Him holding his first fish at the lake. His first report card with a gold star. I smiled sadly. You were a good boy once, I said quietly. You'd hate what you've become. I tucked the photos into the box, added my mother's rosary, a copy of my will, and a few other papers I wanted safe. Then I closed the lid and locked it. That box would hold the only parts of my life worth keeping. The rest, furniture, clothes, dishes, all of it could go. It wasn't home anymore. It was baggage. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, signing the listing papers under the yellow light. Every stroke of my pen felt like closing a door that had been left open too long. The next morning, Mr. Torres called. His voice sounded cheerful, energized. Margaret, you're not going to believe this. I've already got interest. A young couple came by this morning, Caleb and Naomi Thompson. Newly married, no kids yet. They love the house. Said it feels like home already. Do they know it's furnished? I asked. Yes, and that's what sealed it. They said it's a dream deal, move-in ready. They want to make an offer today. How soon can we close? I asked. If everything checks out, less than 2 weeks. He said, they're paying cash. I sat back, smiling faintly. That's perfect. He laughed. You're taking this better than most people I know. You sure you're ready? Oh, I'm ready. I said, they'll never notice what they lost until it's gone. After we hung up, I put the evidence box in the trunk of my car. I covered it with a blanket, locked the doors, and double-checked the key. Then I went back inside and sat for a moment at the edge of my bed. The house was silent, except for the faint tick of Bill's old clock on the wall. I thought about what I'd just done. There was no going back now. Part of me felt guilty. I knew Randy would be furious when he found out. Genevieve would play the victim, tell everyone how cruel I'd been. People might even agree with her. But those people hadn't lived inside these walls, hadn't been slowly erased from their own life. They'd say, she went too far. Maybe I did. But then again, they went too far first. I took one last walk through the house before bed. I paused at the front door, looking at the hallway photos, Randy's graduation, Bill's retirement, my wedding day. I gently took down the ones that mattered, slid them into a folder, and left the rest. When I turned off the lights, I didn't feel sadness. I felt peace, the kind that comes when you stop asking people to treat you better and start treating yourself right. For years, I had given too much of myself, waiting for appreciation that never came. Now, I was giving them exactly what they'd asked for, freedom from me. They'd wake up soon to find that freedom came with a price tag. I whispered into the dark. This house taught them comfort. Maybe losing it will teach them gratitude. The clock struck midnight as I closed my bedroom door. In that quiet, I knew the plan was set. Everything they loved would stay exactly where it was, just in someone else's hands. And that thought, somehow, let me sleep better than I had in years. The next few days were a careful dance. I went about my usual routine, keeping everything calm and ordinary on the surface. But underneath, every move had purpose. Every drawer I opened, every item I boxed, was part of my quiet plan. I started small. I took down a few framed photos from the hallway, the ones that mattered most, and slipped them into a folder. I wrapped up my wedding china, Bill's coffee mug, and the small wooden clock he'd made in his workshop. Everything else stayed where it was. By Thursday, Genevieve noticed. She was walking past my room when she stopped short. "Margaret," she said, peeking in, "where's that vase that used to be on the dresser? And weren't there more photos here?" I smiled faintly. "Just tidying up," I said, "trying to get things organized. Less clutter, more space." She tilted her head, suspicious but polite. "That's good. You've got to stay busy." I could tell she didn't believe me, but she didn't press. That evening, Randy came home irritated. He tossed a bill on the counter. "Another credit card charge. Your old house is a money pit, Mom. We just had to pay for another AC service. That's twice this year." I kept my face neutral, but inside I caught that little phrase, "Your old house." Not our house. Your house. I almost laughed. The words sounded like foreshadowing. "Well," I said calmly, "old things need care. That's why I keep the warranties." He grunted, flipping through the mail, and didn't notice the way my eyes lingered on that bill. It wouldn't be his problem much longer. That night, while everyone was watching TV, I quietly gathered a few boxes from the garage. I filled them with things that truly belonged to me, old recipes, documents, the quilts I'd made, and the evidence box I kept hidden in my closet. I labeled them neatly with masking tape. When I carried one to the car, the next morning, Paula, my neighbor, called out from across the yard. "Moving day already?" she teased. I smiled and walked over. "Not quite. Just getting things in order." She nodded knowingly. "If anyone asks, I'll tell them you're donating blankets to the church." I grinned. "You always know what to say." Paula was the only person who knew something was going on, though even she didn't know the full story. I trusted her enough to keep my secret safe. Later that afternoon, I ran a few errands. When I came back, the house felt oddly quiet. Randy's truck was in the driveway, but I didn't hear anyone inside. I walked in and saw him sitting at the kitchen table, holding the cordless phone. He looked up sharply. "Hey, Mom, Mr. Torres called while you were out. He left a voicemail." My stomach tightened, but my face stayed calm. "Oh, did he say what it was about?" Randy frowned. "Something about closing week." "What's closing week? Are you refinancing?" I gave a soft laugh and reached for my purse. "Oh, no, it's nothing like that. He's helping me appraise the house for insurance. Standard thing, since it's fully paid off. He just uses real estate terms out of habit." Randy looked uncertain, then shrugged. "All right, just sounded businesslike." "Carlos always sounds like that," I said lightly. "He's been in real estate too long." He didn't argue, but the seed of doubt was planted. I could see it in his eyes. Genevieve got home later and whispered something to him in the hallway. Their voices were low, but not low enough. You think she's selling? Genevieve asked. Don't be ridiculous. Randy said, she wouldn't do that. I smiled from my chair in the living room. Oh, but I already had. That evening, I sat at my desk and sorted through papers. I kept only what mattered, the deed copies, a few bank statements, my will, and photos. Everything else went into a shred pile. The sound of the shredder was oddly comforting, like cutting ties one strip at a time. In the kitchen, Genevieve hovered again. You've been doing a lot of cleaning lately, she said carefully. Is everything all right? I looked up from my stack of envelopes. Everything's fine. I just realized how much junk we've collected. It's funny how heavy life feels until you start letting go. She forced a small laugh. Well, don't overdo it. When she left the room, I whispered to myself, if only you knew what I'm letting go of. That weekend, the kids went to a sleepover and the house was quiet. I used the time to finish boxing up my personal things. The evidence box sat neatly on the passenger seat of my car, wrapped in a towel. I opened it one last time just to check. Bill's watch, my jewelry, our family deed, and Randy's baby pictures. That was it. My real history. The rest could stay behind. By Sunday afternoon, the house was spotless. You could have filmed a real estate ad right there. Every room gleamed under the afternoon light. And I realized something. It didn't even feel like mine anymore. It looked like a model home for someone else's dream. As I walked down the hallway, I passed the kids' drawings taped to the wall. Little stick figures labeled Grandma and Papa Bill. I smiled and peeled them down gently, folding them into a notebook. Some memories were worth carrying. Later that evening, I called Mr. Torres. I packed what I needed. I said, you can go ahead and confirm with the buyers. They're thrilled, he said. They can't believe they're getting a furnished house at that price. They want to close early if possible. How early? End of this week. That's fine, I said. Let's do it. When I hung up, I felt light. Not happy, but free. Like I'd finally stopped holding my breath. That night, I sat outside on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was deep blue, the air still warm. I thought about everything that had happened. The years of giving, the slow disrespect, the birthday that broke me. It all led to this quiet moment. The kind where you stop expecting people to see your worth and decide to show it yourself. I whispered, they'll never notice what they lost until it's gone. And I meant every word. Inside, I turned off the last of the lights. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just certain. It's funny how light life becomes when you stop carrying other people's weight. By Tuesday, the whispers had started. Paula told me that morning when I was out in the yard trimming the hedges. Margaret, she said, lowering her voice, someone from down the street mentioned they saw a moving truck parked outside your place yesterday. You know how folks talk around here. I smiled. Let them. A little gossip never hurt anybody. But I knew that small-town gossip traveled faster than truth, and it didn't take long for it to reach Randy. That afternoon, his truck came roaring into the driveway. The tires crunched over the gravel, so hard it made the windows shake. He slammed the door and stormed inside. His face was red, his eyes wild. Are you selling the house, Mom? He shouted the moment he saw me. Tell me you're not that crazy. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my cup of tea, reading the local paper. I didn't flinch. I folded the newspaper neatly and looked at him. You said you were sick of me. I said evenly, I'm just giving you space. He blinked, confused. What does that even mean? You're selling the house we live in. I nodded slowly. The house I own. Yes. His voice got louder. You can't just sell it. We live here. The kids' stuff, our furniture, Everything we have. Genevieve came running from down the hall, already worked up. What is going on? Randy pointed at me. She's selling the house. Behind our backs. Genevieve's face twisted in disbelief. You can't kick us out. All our things are here. I set my teacup down, calm as ever. Then you should have remembered whose name is on the deed. Genevieve gasped like I'd slapped her. Randy slammed his hand against the counter. You wouldn't dare, Mom. Oh, I already did, I said. The words came out quiet, but sharp enough to slice the air between us. Genevieve started pacing. This is insane. We've built a life here. Our kids, I interrupted softly. And my roof, my bills, my home. She pointed at me, trembling with anger. You can't just take everything. This is cruel. I tilted my head. Cruel? You told me you were tired of me. I took that seriously. Randy's voice rose again. You're losing it, Mom. You can't just make decisions like this without telling us. I looked him straight in the eye. I spent 9 years being quiet while you two turned my kindness into entitlement. That silence was my mistake. This house isn't yours, Randy. It never was. He laughed bitterly. Fine, then. I'm calling the cops. Let's see what they say about this stunt. I nodded. Go ahead. He grabbed his phone and stomped to the porch. I could hear him talking fast and angry. Genevieve was crying now, pacing in circles. Within 20 minutes, a patrol car pulled into the driveway. Officer Lane, a familiar face from church, stepped out. He tipped his hat politely. Afternoon, Mrs. Collins, he said. Mind if I come in? Not at all, I said. Randy jumped in before the officer could sit down. She's selling our house without telling us. She's throwing us out. Officer Lane looked from him to me. All right, let's slow down. Whose name is on the deed? Mine, I said simply. Randy's face turned red. But I live here. I pay bills. Officer Lane held up a hand. Let me check the records. He pulled a small tablet from his car and typed for a minute. Then he looked up, calm and matter-of-fact. The property is listed solely under Margaret Collins. She's within her rights to sell it. Genevieve gasped again. You can't be serious. We have kids. The officer sighed, his voice even. I understand this is emotional, but legally, she's right. If she owns it, she can sell it. Randy stepped forward, fists clenched. This is wrong. She's my mother. She can't just throw her family out. I stayed seated, hands folded. You were the one who said you wanted space. Randy, I'm just giving it to you. Genevieve burst into tears. You're destroying this family. I looked at her gently. No, I'm saving what's left of my dignity. The room went silent except for the sound of her crying. Officer Lane gave me a small nod and said quietly, Ma'am, if you need me to make sure everything stays civil while you handle things, just call. Thank you, officer, I said. He left soon after, and the sound of his car fading down the road seemed to pull the last thread of patience out of Randy. He slammed a mug against the counter, shattering it. You're unbelievable. I looked down at the broken pieces on the floor. You just proved my point. Genevieve grabbed his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. He shook her off and stormed out to the porch, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. For a long time, Genevieve just stood there, breathing heavy, staring at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore. Then she whispered, You'll regret this. I picked up my purse and said softly, I already regret not doing it sooner. I walked past her, calm and deliberate. My heart was steady. As I reached the front door, she called out, Where are you going? I turned to her. To make sure the papers are in order. Don't worry. You won't have to see me much longer. Her lip trembled. You really mean that, don't you? Yes, I said. And one day, you'll understand why. I stepped outside into the warm afternoon air. The magnolia tree was in full bloom, white petals falling across the driveway. For years, I thought those petals looked like snow. Now, they looked like freedom. Behind me, I could still hear Genevieve crying and Randy shouting, his voice muffled by the walls. But for the first time in a long time, it wasn't my problem. I walked down the steps, unlocked my car, and slid into the driver's seat. The evidence box was still in the trunk, safe and untouched. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked at the house one last time in the rearview mirror. That house had seen everything: love, laughter, hard work, and now betrayal. And soon it would see something new: peace. People would debate what I did. Some would call it heartless. Others would say it was justice. But as far as I was concerned, it was closure. What do you think? Heartless or justice? Drop your honest answer below. And if you believe I did what any mother would, click subscribe so more women can see that standing up for yourself isn't cruelty. 2 days later, Mr. Torres called earlier than expected. His tone was upbeat. Margaret, good news. The buyers wired the full amount this morning. They're ready to close today if you're available. I looked at the clock. It wasn't even 10 a.m. today. Yes, ma'am. Everything's cleared. They're eager to move in. We can finalize this before lunch. A quiet satisfaction spread through me. Let's do it. He chuckled. That was fast. You sure you're ready? I've been ready for years, I said. By noon, we were standing outside my house, though technically it wasn't mine anymore. The papers were signed, the funds confirmed, and the new owners, Caleb and Naomi, were already there with the moving truck. They were a young couple, early 30s, both school teachers. They smiled wide when they saw me, full of that kind of energy only new homeowners have. Naomi reached out and shook my hand. We can't thank you enough for this. You made this possible for us. I smiled back. I'm happy it's going to someone who'll love it. She laughed softly. And fully furnished, too? It feels like a dream. I nodded. It's all yours now. Everything you see. Mr. Torres handed me a small envelope. Here are your copies, Margaret. The funds will hit your account by tomorrow morning. Thank you, Carlos, I said. You've been wonderful. The movers started unloading boxes. The sound of tape, footsteps, and laughter filled the air. It should have felt strange watching strangers take over my space, but instead, it felt like release. I stood by the curb, watching quietly, when the familiar sound of a truck tore through the calm. Randy's pickup skidded to a stop in the driveway. He jumped out, slamming the door so hard it shook the mirror. What the hell is this? He yelled, marching toward me. Genevieve got out on the passenger side, face pale, hair still damp from the shower. Mom, why are there people moving into our house? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to choose every word carefully. The sale went through. I said, finally, it closed this morning. Randy blinked. You sold it? Already? You didn't even give us time to. I cut him off, my tone calm. You had time. You just didn't think I'd follow through. He pointed toward the front door where Caleb and Naomi were walking in. They're moving our stuff. All our furniture. Our things. What's going on? Naomi stepped out then, polite but firm. Excuse me, who are you? Genevieve gasped. Who are we? We live here. Naomi frowned slightly, confused. I'm sorry, but everything inside was included in the sale. Furniture, decor, appliances, it's all ours now. It was part of the contract. Randy froze. His eyes darted toward the window, where he could see his favorite couch, the one he'd bragged about buying. His gaming chair sat next to it, untouched, looking smaller somehow in the bright light. Genevieve's hands shook. Our clothes, our baby photos, everything. I looked at her and said softly, Not everything. Randy turned to me, voice breaking. What did you do, Mom? I opened my purse and pulled out the small wooden box, the one I'd carried from my trunk that morning. I handed it to him gently. I made sure to save everything that had real value, I said. The rest was just clutter. He looked down at the box, confused. When he opened it, he saw the stack of photos, him at Little League, his first report card, the small paper handprint he'd made in kindergarten. He swallowed hard, eyes glassy. Why would you do this? He whispered. I met his gaze without flinching. Because you told me you were sick of me, Randy. You said you needed space. I gave it to you. Completely. Genevieve stepped closer. You can't just erase us like this. This is cruel. I shook my head. Cruel was pretending I didn't matter while living off my kindness. This is peace. Naomi, the new owner, looked uncomfortable. Do you want to take a moment inside to collect anything personal before we start unloading? She asked carefully. I smiled kindly at her. Thank you, dear, but everything that's mine is already with me. Genevieve started to cry. You've ruined us, Margaret. Where will we go? I looked at her with quiet honesty. You're adults. You'll figure it out, just like I did when I lost everything and started over. Randy's face softened for just a moment. We didn't mean it, Mom. We were just frustrated that day. I sighed. Words have weight, Randy. You said them, and I believed you. You wanted me gone. You got your wish. The air grew still. Even the movers slowed, glancing at us but pretending not to listen. Finally, I took a small step back, ready to leave. I hope you find the peace you couldn't find here. Neither of them spoke. Genevieve turned away, wiping her face. Randy just stood there holding that small box like it was something fragile he'd forgotten how to protect. Mr. Torres gestured toward his car. We're all set, Margaret. You don't need to stay any longer. I nodded. Thank you, Carlos. Naomi and Caleb came over as I started to walk toward the street. Naomi smiled gently. Thank you again. We'll take good care of it. I know you will, I said, and I meant it. I got into my car, started the engine, and looked back one last time. Randy was still standing in the driveway, holding that box, staring at the house like it was something he didn't recognize anymore. Genevieve was pacing, on her phone, probably calling someone to complain. The movers were carrying in the last of the couple's boxes, chatting about paint colors and new beginnings. For them, it was a first chapter. For me, it was an ending that finally made sense. As I drove away, the magnolia tree disappeared from view in my rearview mirror. That house had been my heart for so long, but it had stopped feeling like home years ago. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't even feel revenge. What I felt was quiet, pure quiet. I thought about what Bill would have said if he'd seen it all. I imagined him smiling, that soft half smile of his, and saying, "You always were stronger than you thought, Maggie." At the red light, I glanced at the box on the passenger seat. I ran my fingers over its lid. Inside, it wasn't just photos and papers. It was proof that I'd kept the right pieces of my life. I whispered, "You said you wanted space, Randy. Now you've got all the room in the world." When the light turned green, I drove on without looking back. Behind me, the house that once held our family stood under the afternoon sun, shining bright for someone else's future. And maybe that's how it was always meant to end. The week after the sale, I moved into a small condo just outside Street Marks, Florida. It wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful, 2 bedrooms, white walls, and a little balcony that faced the water. For the first time in years, I had a space that was mine, and mine alone. My first morning there felt strange, in the best way. The sun slipped through the lace curtains I'd hung myself, and the smell of coffee filled the quiet kitchen. No arguing, no footsteps, no slammed doors. Just silence, steady and soft. I made a single cup of coffee and carried it to the balcony. The air smelled like salt and jasmine. A few fishing boats were heading out to sea, their motors humming in the distance. I leaned on the railing and thought, so this is what peace sounds like. Inside, my boxes were half unpacked. I'd kept only what mattered. My old quilt, a handful of books, a few dishes, and the small wooden box that had followed me everywhere. I spread my quilt over the bed, its faded colors familiar and comforting. Then I opened the box. Inside were the pieces of my life that still felt true. Bill's watch, our wedding rings, the deed I no longer needed but couldn't throw away, and those pictures of Randy as a boy. In one photo, he's grinning ear to ear, missing his front teeth, holding up a frog he caught at the creek behind our old house. I couldn't help but smile. I traced his face with my thumb and whispered, "You were once my peace, before you became my burden." The words came out soft, not bitter, more like a fact I'd finally made peace with. I spread the photos across the table and sat for a while, sipping my coffee, remembering. Back then, I never imagined the boy in those pictures would grow into a man who'd say, "We're sick of you, Mom." But I also knew that boy still existed somewhere under the pride, the anger, and the distance. I hoped someday he'd find that version of himself again. After breakfast, I went into town to pick up a few things. The thrift store on Main Street had a sale going, and I found everything I needed, a small lamp, a couple of picture frames, and a table runner that reminded me of the one Bill used to spill his coffee on every morning. I even found a small potted plant with broad green leaves. The tag said Peace Lily, and that felt fitting. When I got home, I arranged everything just the way I liked it. Simple, open, no clutter. Every corner of that condo felt light, like it was breathing with me. That afternoon, I sat down at my small writing desk and pulled out a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "Today, peace feels like space." I looked at the words for a long time. It was true, not just the physical space of the condo, but the mental space of not walking on eggshells anymore. No one questioning me, no one talking over me, just stillness. Later, I got a call from Paula. "Settled in yet?" she asked. "Almost," I said, still trying to figure out which drawer should hold the spoons. She laughed. "Well, I'm coming over tomorrow with pastries. And don't you say no. You need company that doesn't complain about coffee being too strong." "Fine," I said, smiling. "Bring those lemon ones I like." The next morning, she showed up with a paper bag full of pastries and 2 mugs. We sat out on the balcony, eating and talking about everything except the past. Paula looked around and said, "You've made this place cozy already. It suits you." "It's small," I said, "but I think I like small." "Sometimes small is exactly enough," she replied. We talked about ordinary things, the weather, the neighbor downstairs who fed stray cats, a little seafood diner she wanted to try next week. It was nice, easy. When she left, I cleaned up the crumbs, watered the plant, and watched the sun dip low over the water. The horizon turned pink and gold, the kind of sunset Bill always stopped to watch. I sat on the balcony until the light faded, then went back inside and looked around the room again. It finally felt like mine, every inch of it. I pulled out my notebook once more and added another line under what I'd written earlier. I thought revenge would taste sharp, but it tastes like quiet. I closed the book and set it on the table beside the small wooden box. That night, I slept deeply. No shouting, no footsteps in the hallway, no tension seeping through the walls. Just the steady hum of the ceiling fan and the rhythm of my own breathing. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee again and the sound of seagulls outside. I looked at the photos on the table and smiled at one in particular, Randy as a little boy, hugging a puppy he'd rescued. I picked it up and said softly, "You'll come around someday. Maybe not soon, but someday." I slipped the photo back into the box and locked it gently, not to hide it, just to keep it safe. As I poured my coffee, I thought about everything that had led me here, every argument, every moment I bit my tongue, every time I put someone else's comfort above my own. All those years of giving had left me empty, and yet, sitting there in my quiet little condo, I finally felt full again. Sometimes peace isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about getting out. I didn't know what the future would look like. Maybe visits from Paula, maybe a call from the grandkids, maybe nothing at all. But whatever it held, it would be mine to decide. I stepped onto the balcony, looked out at the open water, and whispered, "I made it." And in that moment, I truly believed it. A few quiet weeks passed after I settled into my new place. The days began to find their rhythm. Mornings were slow and gentle, afternoons peaceful, evenings calm. I didn't check the mail often. Most of what I received were small things like bills or flyers. But one morning, there was an envelope with handwriting I recognized right away. It had been forwarded from my old address. The return name read Randy Collins. For a moment, I just stared at it. My hands felt heavier than they should have. Part of me wanted to throw it out, pretend it didn't exist. But another part of me, the mother part, still needed to know what he had to say. I made a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and opened the letter. It started plain, no greeting, just his handwriting, rushed and uneven. "I can't believe you sold everything, even my guitar. That was my life, Mom." That was the first line. The rest was short. A few sentences about how I'd embarrassed him, how Genevieve was still furious, how the kids didn't understand why Grandma did what she did. He said I'd gone too far. He said I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But there wasn't a single word about the years of free rent. Not a word about the food I cooked, the bills I paid, the nights I stayed up with their sick kids while they slept. Not even a mention of thank you. Just the guitar. When I finished reading, I sat there for a while, staring at the page. My coffee had gone cold. I could almost hear Bill's voice in my head, calm and steady as ever. People only see what they lose, not what they took for granted. I folded the letter quietly and placed it on the table. I didn't cry, and I didn't get angry. I just felt a kind of acceptance, like the last puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. He wasn't ready to understand, and maybe he never would be, but I had already made peace with that. Later that afternoon, I opened the small wooden box that had followed me everywhere. Inside were the photos, the watch, the rings, and now the letter. I placed it on top, locked the box, and slid it under my bed. Some things are better kept, not revisited. When evening came, I stepped out onto the balcony. The air was soft, the sea breeze gentle against my skin. The water shimmered under the fading light. I leaned on the railing and spoke out loud, though no one was there to hear. They thought I sold out of spite. I said, but I sold because they forgot who built that home. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the ocean and the distant call of the gulls. That house used to hold my laughter, my family, my life, but it had turned into something else, a reminder of how people can take and take until you forget you ever had boundaries. Out here, in this small space of my own, I'd found something better than revenge. I'd found peace. I thought about Randy again, about how angry he must have been writing that letter. Maybe one day he'd read it back to himself and see what he'd really said and what he didn't. Until then, I'd keep hoping that one day he'd knock on my door, not to argue, but to sit down for coffee and say, "I get it now, Mom." But if that day never came, I'd still be all right. I looked up at the darkening sky and whispered, "You were once my peace, Randy. I hope someday you find yours." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and blooming jasmine. I breathed it in and smiled. I'd spent years making sure everyone else was comfortable. I'd worked myself to exhaustion trying to keep the peace, not realizing I'd lost my own in the process. Now, I understood something that took me nearly 70 years to learn. Sometimes you have to lose everything familiar to find yourself again. People will argue about what I did. Some will say I was wrong. Others will say I was brave. But the truth is simple. I did what needed to be done. They told me they were sick of me, so I gave them what they wanted, freedom. And in doing that, I found my own. I turned and went back inside. My small condo glowed in the evening light. The thrift store lamp gave the room a warm, golden hue. My quilt rested neatly on the bed, and the peace lily stood tall in the corner. This was home now, not because it was filled with things, but because it was filled with peace. Before turning in for the night, I picked up my notebook from the table. On the last page, I wrote one final line. Sometimes peace costs everything, and that's still a bargain. I closed the notebook, placed it beside the locked box, and turned off the light. For the first time in years, I didn't fall asleep replaying old conversations or worrying about what tomorrow might bring. I simply rested. And that's the real ending, not the sale of a house, but the start of a life that finally belonged to me. Now, before you go, I want to ask you something. What would you have done? Would you have stayed, swallowing your hurt to keep the peace? Would you have walked away quietly or taken everything with you? Was I wrong to sell it all? Or was it the only way to finally be free? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts. And if my story spoke to you, if you've ever had to choose peace over family or strength over silence, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. There are so many stories like mine, and every one of them deserves to be heard. Because in the end, we all have a moment when we stop being someone's convenience and start being our own person again. Lastly, don't forget to download a book that's close to my heart, 38 uplifting and funny short stories for seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. Thank you for listening.